Don't pick me! Oh my God!
So, I believe I've made it clear several times now about my opinions of Zenless Zone Zero's content offerings in the latter half of version 1, as well as version 2.0. The ZZZ team of Hoyoverse has been in a constant state of catch-up as they try to rework the very foundation of the game's mechanics and playable content following the sunsetting of the Hollow Deep Dive system that was in place prior. For all intents and purposes, version 2.0 was the climax of said unprepared reworking of the entire game that finally caught up to them, as the story and content provided was heavily criticized for being padded out with little substance. Do people seriously just not understand how little time 6 weeks is to put something together, regardless of if there was pre-production or not? Wait, hold on. I got an idea. There we go. Now everyone will be okay with it. At the time of 2.0's release, I predicted that the start of Season 2 would effectively be a massive hill the ZZZ team would need to climb, but after overcoming said climb, would be able to get back into the groove and provide players with more substantial content offerings and interesting stories. Well, the hurdle has been jumped, and 6 weeks later, we now have version 2.1. And having had a chance to experience most of the content, I can say confidently that Zenless Zone Zero is finally beginning to find its footing again, and we might see an upward trend in the game's quality that we've been starved of for a while now. 2.1, in my opinion, ranks in the top 3 game versions of ZZZ, behind versions 1.0 and 1.4, for obvious reasons. And I intend to go over this patch as to why I believe that to be the case. I will be going over the story, major content additions, and the permanent event content released in this version. I will not be covering limited time events or characters, as not everyone will have access to this content when the patch or respective banner cycles are over. On the topic of story, this is your warning now that there will be story spoilers immediately after, as that is the first topic I want to discuss. Skip ahead to the timestamp on screen or past the marked chapter on the video timeline to jump ahead until you have had the chance to experience the story for yourself. Following the events of Where the Clouds Embrace the Dawn and the miasma crisis caused by the Exaltists and their overseer, the TOP's subsidiary company, Porcelumex, in charge of the porcelain production in Waifei Peninsula, has arranged a special banquet in light of recent events, resulting in a company-wide safety inspection. Damien extends the invitation to the twins and Yunkoi Summit following your recent interactions with the TOP's higher-up. During the twins' time at the banquet, they learn of Porcelumex's relative lax behavior despite the recent corruption outbreak in the region, are introduced to the 2 heads of the company, Lucro and Ferex, and discover that they've been in a corporate clash to maintain dominance in the company, with Damien below them on the ladder with no intention of picking a side as to not disrupt the power balance at the cost of his own advancement in the company. We are also introduced to Alice Thimefield, a rabbit Theron who's the heir to the Thimefield family, renowned for their advancements in anti-corruption medicine, namely her grandfather's claim of a legal patent that monopolizes the manufacturing method of said medicine. Damien invited Alice to discuss transferring the patent to Porcelumex as her grandfather has fallen ill and the legal documents only require that a Thimefield family member sign off on the transfer. Damien's bargaining chip? He'll attempt to spin the recent corruption outbreak from the Exaltics, selling cheaper, miasma-laced medicine into the Thimefield family using underhanded methods in their medicine production process, resulting in a media scandal and opening the way for Damien to get away with a manufactured lawsuit. Later that night, as Alice is being crushed under the pressure of Damien's demands, an unknown object colliding with the hotel room window scares her in the process. The next morning, Alice gets in touch with Lucy of the Sons of Caldon to commission the proxies to assist her in finding out what happened last night. Their investigation would lead them to Kamano Monado, whom we've met previously during our time with Yijuan, and Ukanami Yuzuha, a young girl who helps her father run a local porcelain antique shop in Feilum Heights. After a brief confrontation, Yuzuha shows the proxy a shard of Obscura, refined porcelain-based material used in lab equipment for hollow and ether research. Yuzuha believes the Obscura shard points to Porcelumex manufacturing and profiting off of high-end porcelain products at the expense of their workers, customers, and public relations, and wants to find the source of the Obscura to expose the company's corruption. The proxy offers their services, and Alice herself joins along sometime later. With the help of Isolde, a member of the new Eridu Defense Force invited to Damien's banquet yesterday, the group would reach a hidden research facility on the coast of the Lemnian Hollow, and after a couple days, would confirm their suspicions of what's going on, following an attempted ambush by a Porslumex employee attempting to silence Alice, believing she had witnessed the contents of their cargo the night the shipment crate collided with her window following an equipment failure of a nearby lift crane. Porslumex were attempting to demolish the facility inside the Hollow to cover up their dealings with the Exaltus cults. Though, there might be more to that. In my previous video covering 2.0's story, I briefly mentioned how the Overseer had survived their battle with Yi Zhuan and pulled memories from her to create a sacrifice creature of sorts. Well, that same creature happened to have been created at the heart of the facility, and has recently begun slaughtering the corporation's staff after the cult have left the area. Whether the intent to blow up the facility came before or after the creature started wreaking havoc is something I'm not sure of, though someone in the comments will probably clear that up for me later. The group would attempt to escape the facility after having a run-in with the creature, only to be ambushed by Feryx, revealing him as the one behind the dealings with the Exaltists. After being captured by Feryx, and just before escaping, Yuzuha would stay behind to the protest of Alice as a peace offering to the power-hungry co-CEO, with her trading her freedom in exchange for her friend's safety. It is then revealed, though it's hinted at throughout the story, that Yuzuha was raised in this facility years ago and was the only survivor of a group of child test subjects, only escaping because Alice's father at the time had returned back to the facility, having visited it earlier in the day alongside his daughter because she had lost a hair clip while touring the facility that she greatly cherished, which now is in the possession of Yuzuha. Her father found Yuzuha passed out from the side effects of the experiments that had been testing on her earlier that day, only waking to find Alice's father had taken her in an attempt to send her through a drainage pipe to be carried away by the sea to civilization. This was the last time Alice had seen her father before she was told he died in a car accident, when in reality, he was gunned down by security in the lab covering Yuzuha's escape. Later that evening, the group would plan an attempt to break back into the facility to rescue Yuzuha and to stop Feryx before he can cover up the scandal. They would enlist the assistance of the now revealed Colonel Isolde alongside members of Obel Squad, Yi Zhuan, and Damien in exchange for Alice's legal patent for the anti-corruption medicine for free. The group would successfully return in time to kill the miasmic fiend, put Feryx in custody, and for Alice to reunite with Yuzuha. The story concludes with Alice revealing that she not only relinquished her family's anti-corruption medicine patent to Damien and Porslumex, but also opened the patent up to the general public as well, effectively getting the last laugh on Damien's exploitation of her. The final scene reveals just how deep Feryx's Obscura production has been distributed across Wi-Fi Peninsula, with more to come in future story content updates. To give my opinions on the story, I believe the impending crash of waves to be a much tighter and well-told story when compared to version 2.0, that puts a greater focus on the individual characters and their relationships with one another. Its runtime sits at an acceptable 4 hours when compared to version 2.0's 5 hours that were mainly bloated due to mandatory tutorial sections. Black screen content has also been dramatically cut back on, as well as more comic scenes and animated cinematics are introduced in this story. As for the characters, Spook Shack are a much more interesting group when compared to Yunkoi Summit. The relationship between Yuzuha and Alice and their history do a lot to elevate the story, and it was great to see a dynamic where we experience an unaffiliated character join an established group in the world as our introduction to them, something we haven't seen since Nekomata in version 1.0. Pulchra doesn't count. That was shoehorned in through a throwaway unvoiced limited time event. The introduction of Isolde was also very well executed as a means to set up for the events of the next major story in later game versions, with Orphe and Magnus, as well as Seed making appearances in the latter half of the story. And let's of course not forget my boy Damien, who continues to be a fantastic gray area character, acting as our direct means of interacting with the TOPS corporate conglomerate. Despite our shared goals with taking down the Exaltus cult, Damien still looks out for his own bottom line when it comes to matters that don't directly affect him. My only real complaint with the story is the lack of screen time given to Feryx. Though if I were to think for a moment why that is, I'd wager it was a deliberate decision, as the ZZZ team are definitely putting all their attention on developing Damien as a possible antagonist once the story of Season 2 approaches its climax. And with Lucro, now the unchallenged CEO of Porslumex, without anyone to butt heads with for now, there'll be plenty more to come for our cunning businessman. To anyone writing 2.1 off as a filler patch because of all the marketing and promotional material calling attention to all the summer beach themed content should really re-examine the story on offer and realize how much of a step up this was when compared to a lot of the storytelling we saw in Season 1 of ZZZ. Fantasy Resort is a new location where the twins, Yuzuha and Alice, decide to spend summer vacation as part of a permanent event. The player will be attempting to restore the resort's public reception and popularity by playing and promoting several activities you will be partaking in around the area. First up on the list is the Archipelago Shoot, a water gun shooting gallery where you shoot targets for points on a time limit with typically 5 waves of targets before the stage is over. I personally found this to be the most fun of the 3 activities. There's several different ammo types you can choose between to help you hit certain target formations more effectively, and being a PC player of course, I had the luxury of using a mouse and keyboard for this content. Solid activity, wish there was more of it honestly. Next up, we have Blazing Waves. I'd say this one's kind of a miss. You're meant to ride a surfboard from start to finish on a linear track. You have a boost gauge that can hold a maximum of 2 charges, and it's generated from the pickups on the track or by drifting. I'd say the foundation of this activity is fun, but its execution needs some refinement. The board's speed oftentimes feels too slow when on straightaways to the point where I feel like I'm not doing something right while playing this event. And as for the drifting, well, this ain't no Mario Kart. Drifting oftentimes feels too tight, but then suddenly you just hard curve straight into the barriers when making turns. I was also getting some minor motion sickness because of how the camera behaves in Blazing Waves, often too close to the player and never staying directly behind them when moving horizontally. This gets even worse if you start bouncing off the walls from the wonky drifting. And I need to also mention the visual effects happening on the edges of the screen, which wasn't helping my situation either. For me, this makes ZZZ the 3rd Hoyoverse game I've played where I've experienced motion sickness from either permanent or limited time content. It's nowhere near as bad as when I would walk on the walls or the ceilings in Penacony in a Honkai Star Rail, but it's something to keep in mind if you're easily susceptible to motion sickness. Like the concept, execution needs some work. Lastly, we have Ocean Angling, which is just a slightly reworked version of the Elpis fishing event content we had in version 1.5. The only real difference is being an overall reduction in the time it takes to catch fish, shorter wait times for the fish to bite, faster clashes with fish, and you're on a boat that can be sailed to between fishing spots. The only major addition is the ability to catch fish and either donate them to the resort's aquarium or sell them to buy better fishing rods or fish tank decorations for the aforementioned aquarium. For some reason, only some of the fish caught out on the sea can be brought back to the aquarium, and the rest just exist to fill out a collection log. If you've liked the fishing before, this is just more of it, but streamlined and sped up. Not much else to say really. Overall, I'd say Tales of Midsummer is an okay permanent event that I'm sure most people will find some fun in, though most will probably be focusing on the character interactions in this event rather than the activities housed in the event itself. After completing the 2.1 story, you can revisit the area now referred to as the Old Building Complex to explore, fight enemies, and find rewards. To briefly reiterate my opinions of the open world content in ZZZ from my version 2.0 video, exploration is very surface level with basic puzzle interactions and standard enemy encounters. Its only upside in my opinion is that it's the fastest to 100% explore of any of these exploration focused gacha games. So if you're like me and hate all these open world games cluttering up the space, you can thankfully be done with this in 1 to 2 hours without the need for an interactive map due to the simplicity of the map layout and the prevalence of an item that you can pick up to mark all the collectibles. That's all I have to say, let's move on. So it's only just now when writing this part of the script did I realize that the last stand variation of the battle tower in version 1.5 just went away at the start of 2.1, which I never got around to completing the last 5 floors of for rewards, so I guess my account will forever be marked with this filthy casual badge of shame for the rest of my existence. Shit! The limited time variation of the battle tower has reset with an updated enemy roster, a new scoring system, and unique buffs you can pick up as you ascend the floor. If you're looking to flex your ZZZ cred, then look no further. Hollow Zero content has also been updated with new unique gear for Yuzuha and Alice when she eventually releases, and the Perpetrator battle section where you can trial characters with all their unique gear has been updated to include the aforementioned two, as well as Yizhuan and Jufufu. This will be a good chance to try the characters out, though of course keep in mind that the unique gear you can play around with in these modes are not representative of the characters outside of Hollow Zero content. To close things out, here's just a few things I wanted to make note of that I found in the patch notes. The minimap will now show a dotted trail directing players to their mission objectives for easier navigation. A simple, nice addition to have to help players who may be overwhelmed with the user interface. Controller players now have a wider range of button customization options to choose from. This might be a positive for you, but for me, I already bitched about them taking away my ability to bind Ultimate to left trigger on my Xbox controller at the start of 2.0. Now it's bound to clicking the left stick, and I'm not about to go through the trouble of relearning inputs I've long made my peace with. Don't do it again, Hoyoverse. Lastly, which I didn't find in the patch notes but I know is a thing, is that now players can auto-complete trials for A-rank characters they've already used in previous banner cycles. I'm all for this personally. The less I'm reminded of how bad Anton is as a character when it forces me to use him for a trial because he's right up on the current banner, the happier I am. Just going off of 2.1 story content alone, I can confidently say that Zenless Zone Zero is finally getting back on track. The secondary content of this patch is also a solid addition to the game's offerings as well, with a wide variety of activities for both the casual and hardcore player to sink their teeth into. I wouldn't go as far to say we're so back, but if this level of quality can gradually improve in the coming patches, then ZZZ will finally have the chance to rise above the shadow of its former glory and into something we've all been waiting patiently for since version 1.4. And with that, I have said all I really wanted to about the major content of Zenless Zone Zero's version 2.1 update. During the latter half of 2.0, I was definitely feeling tuckered out from all the filler content the ZZZ team was desperately using to stall for time as they were trying to figure out what to do with the game as far back as version 1.6. But with the quality of version 2.1, as well as the banners of Yuzuha, Alice, and reruns of Miyabi and Yanagi in this patch, as well as the two new skins, I think it's safe to say 2.1 will be a financially successful patch for the ZZZ team to help keep spirits up as we ride this momentum into 2.2 later down the line. But until then, this has been Arikado Zodan, and I'm clocking out.